All right, so welcome to my artist talk for my show at Studio Gallery in San Francisco. I'll give you the details. The show runs from October 15th to November 2nd, 2020. There were 40 new paintings, and the address is 1641 Pacific Avenue between Polk and Van Ness in San Francisco. And I will put a link down below in case you want to see images and get purchase info on the paintings. And then also I made a video where I did a gallery visit and then I talked about some of the paintings in the show, and I will link that up here in case you want to see that. But so what happens is every year, actually this is the 7th solo show I've done at Studio, and so typically what we'll do is the first weekend there'll be a reception, and then the second weekend of the show there'll be an artist talk where I come in and I answer questions and kind of talk about how I got started as a painter, etc. But obviously this year I'm doing it all digitally, so this is the artist talk portion. So I asked for questions on the last video, so I've got a bunch of questions here. But first what I'll talk about is, I'll give you a little brief history of how I started painting and then how I got connected with Studio Gallery, and then I'll get into the questions that were in the comment section. So I started painting in 2003, and it's funny, I try to remember back and think of what it was that actually inspired me to paint, because it was sort of, I didn't have any artistic experience really, other than just like drawing as a kid. In 2003 I was 38 years old, and I know that I wanted to have real paintings in my house as opposed to prints, so that was one motivator. A second motivator was, this was 2003, so it was shortly after 9/11, and we had a tradition in our family of going back to Cape Cod, and I've been going there since I was a kid, South Wellfleet on Cape Cod. And it was in August that I started painting, which was about the time of that vacation. And this was going to be the second year of missing it, because we also had a small child. My daughter Emma was, I guess, just about 2 years old. So I was missing that vacation, and I felt like I wanted to do a painting of Cape Cod, of the cottages we stayed in, and just because I was missing it, and I wanted something to look at that reminded me of those vacations. So that was another inspiration. But for whatever reason, I just went to Michael's, it was Aaron Brothers, the framing shop, and I bought a bunch of art supplies, and I didn't really know what to, I didn't have any sort of idea of how to go about oil painting. And as you guys know, if you're oil painters, just figuring out the materials can be really challenging. So I just bought a beginner kit of Grumbacher oil paints. I bought a few brushes and a few canvas panels, and then I chose some photographs, and I set the panel onto a music stand, and a very wobbly music stand, and I just kind of reproduced this photograph. And it took me 4 sessions of about 6 hours each. And there was enough good happening in the painting that I wanted to do another, but I felt like it didn't look like a painting, like paintings I'd seen before, like Impressionist work or Van Gogh. I didn't have I hadn't seen a lot of work before. So I knew the Impressionist work and I knew Van Gogh, but I didn't know a lot of other painters. But in any case, I knew enough to know that my painting looked like a reproduction of a photograph as opposed to an actual painting. So I needed more information, so I went to the library. As I said, my daughter was really small, and so she was 2 years old, Emma, and so I would pick her up from daycare and then go to the Burlingame Library. There was an area for kids to kind of play, and it was sort of gated off. It was great. And I would go downstairs first and get an art book, and then I'd come up and I'd look at the art book and sit there for hours sometimes, because there were other kids for her to play with. It was really actually, a nice way to let her have fun and also be productive at the same time. So I mostly learned from books, and then I just started going out plein air painting, because the books that I've been reading, primarily by the painter Emile Groupé, those books encouraged you to get outdoors and paint from life as much as possible. So I did that. I started going out in plein air painting, and it was very difficult. And but I definitely got hooked on it, and I continued to paint in the studio as well. And then I'd say about 4 years into the journey, actually, in 2007, I submitted some work to Studio Gallery. So now we'll get into how I got associated with Studio. I had been selling online. I had like a blogger, you know, I'd post a picture of a painting that I did and a little write-up about the painting experience. And then I would put a link to eBay. Dwayne Kaiser started this sort of thing, Painting a Day. Carol Marine is another really popular daily painter. And I just felt like that could be a good thing for me to do. So that was probably 2005 or 2006. And I just started painting these little 6x6 paintings. Sometimes I do 8x10s or whatever, but they were very small. And I was trying to post them every day, and I did for about 6 months. After the 6 months were over, I would post less frequently because I started getting outdoors and wanting to paint larger. But for those 6 months, I did a lot of 6x6s and ended up selling, I think 1 year I sold 85 of them, which was great. That was a big confidence builder. And also just that daily painting routine made me grow as a painter to the point where I think shortly after I finished that, you know, that 6 month period, I felt like my work was sort of becoming like, I kind of found my groove, so to speak. So then I went on a trip. I think it was 2007. I went on a trip with a friend of mine who is a great painter, Tim Horn. You can check him out online. And Tim and I went back to Maine, and I spent a couple days with him on Monhegan, and then I spent some time in Port Clyde with family. And I did some plein air painting on that trip that I think was it was like, for me, it was like next level. I kind of doing all those little 6x6s had paid off and improved my plein air painting. So when I got back, I sent some images to Jen at the gallery. And we had talked before, but I think I maybe had participated in one show, like I had a piece in the show, but their gallery was very small, and they had limited wall space. And so, but at this point they'd moved to a new location across the street, a little bit bigger on Polk Street. And I sent her some images. I said, hey, Jen, I'm just back from Maine. I haven't talked to you in a while or whatever. Here's some of the paintings I did. And she was like, oh, these are great. Can I come by and take a look at what you've got? She said, we have a show that we're selecting pieces for. People, Places, and Things, it was called. So it was kind of an open, you know, it was like, it was just like any category. It didn't matter. So I said, yeah, come by, anytime. And she came by, and I put out boxes of all the paintings I'd done, and I had only sold a few at this point, like of my larger work, like say 9x12s and 11x14s. And she started looking through the boxes, and she picked out 10. And she asked me, I remember her asking me, she's like, how many of these can I take? And I said, take as many as you want. And so she chose 10 paintings, and then they were in this show, People, Places, and Things. And this may have been in the, I'm getting confused, it may have been in the original place, the really small place. I think it actually was. Anyway, it doesn't matter. None of those paintings sold, I don't think. But then I got into more of a regular groove, and I started participating in all of the shows that were open, kind of open calls. And I think the first ones that really clicked for me was when I started painting cityscapes in San Francisco. And I started painting the cityscapes just to challenge myself. Like, I love San Francisco, I love the city. It's just a very beautiful city, and there's a lot of interesting compositional potential there, and beautiful light too. The light there, especially actually this time of year in fall. So I started painting city paintings, and I felt like, they actually started doing really well. So at the gallery, those were the first paintings to sell. And they continued to sell, and so then at some point they offered me a solo show. And so now I've been with Studio for 13 years. So I feel like in a way we've grown up together. Like I say, I started off in the smallest little gallery, and then to the bigger one, and now they're in the gallery that you may have seen in my videos. Beautiful, big, nice gallery. So that's kind of how I got associated with studio, and now I do show at some other galleries, but the studio's like, that's my home gallery. And since we go way back, and I just love the way they present the work. It's just such a great environment. And what was I going to say? So we've done 7, this will be the 7th, and we just talked about it. We're going to do it again next fall. So that's kind of the story, the brief story of how I got into painting and how I started showing at studio. And somebody asked in the questions, we're going to just jump right into the questions, and somebody asked, me to talk about that process of like getting a gallery and stuff. And the one thing I would say about that is, I found that it was really helpful to actually start by selling direct, because it gave me a kind of an idea of, when I was posting on my blog, I could see what paintings were appealing to people. And so I started having an idea and taking responsibility for my own sales, and sort of, I won't say that I would paint to sell, but if something was an interest, like if people showed a lot of interest in something, that it would certainly encourage me to explore those avenues. So I used to do a lot of these little fruit still life paintings, very simple with thick brushwork, and you may have seen some of those. It'd be like, say bananas or avocados, or just very simple with a simple white background. And those did really well. So I kind of explored that whole thing. And so I felt like that when I did actually start showing with studio, I kind of had an idea of what work people were responding to. And so I would bring them work that had been, well received online. And I think that was really helpful. So what I'd say is, if you're looking to get a gallery, I would say start trying to build up the following on Instagram, and maybe even doing some small shows locally, community centers. I know things are it's kind of difficult right now, to have real world shows or whatever. But, when things open up again, to show in cafes or libraries, or I did a couple in churches, actually. I had a pastor at a church ask me, he found me online and asked if I would do a show. And I had a policy of saying yes to everything. So anyway, when I finally did approach studio, I did have some experience. I'd had some shows in these community centers, went through that process of putting together a show, framing it, doing all the, the touch-ups and titling and varnishing and everything, and kind of just presenting all the work. That was invaluable. So I guess I'm rambling here, but what I'd say if you want to get into gallery is try to build up a following online first. Like Instagram is probably the best way right now. Some people like Facebook as well, but through social media, even YouTube, and then participate in any kind of shows you can in real life to get some experience actually presenting your work in the real world. And then choose a gallery I think that you can grow with, as opposed to like trying to get into a gallery that's like already, established. I think that's the experience or the lesson that I've learned. It's been really great sort of growing and developing with a gallery, and it's been a great experience. So let's see, moving on. Do you think all the paintings in this show have something in common? I would say they do, in that, obviously they have, the thing they have in common is that I painted them all, and they're all like things that appealed to me, and I only put paintings in the show that I would actually hang on my wall. So these are all paintings that appeal to my personal taste. There are paintings that I do have throughout the year that I think are well executed, but maybe I just don't identify with them personally. It's not something I'd wanna, it might be an experiment, or it might be, for whatever reason, there might be something about it that I don't really click with. That doesn't mean that somebody else won't click with it. Like if I have a studio visit, people come through and oftentimes they'll buy those paintings, the ones that aren't particularly my favorites. But I would say the common thread through all of these is that I painted them, they appeal to my aesthetic sense. And number two, they're all, I think, the way I compose, and also my focus on trying to capture a convincing feeling of light. Those are the two things that are most important to me, composition and light. And I think that's something that you'll see throughout these paintings, is that there is that focus. All right, let's see. What is more challenging, painting from one of your existing paintings or painting plein air? I haven't really reproduced many of my paintings. I know there's a what do you call it? There's like a, a lot of plein air painters will go out and do studies, and then they'll do larger work from those studies. That's something that I'm thinking I might do more of in the future. But to be honest, I haven't done a lot of that. Maybe only a couple times, and I find that it's easier in a way because I've already reduced, I've already decided it's easier than plein air because I've already decided on the composition. I'm only going to reproduce a painting that I already like. So I know, like, okay, this painting has a good composition. It's been simplified already and edited. In other words, I've chosen what I want to include and what I want to leave out from the original scene. So I find it to be easier, but maybe in a way less exciting, and also a little bit, there's a challenge of trying to make it look as good as the original. So if I'm reproducing a painting, it's because I think a little bit of magic happened in the original. And oftentimes in the reproduction, it's just, there's so many decisions that are made in doing a painting, and when that sort of magic happens, and when I say magic, I mean things that you don't intend. You're just doing, you're engaged in the process, painting the way you always do, and it's not until you get back from it until you notice there's some really beautiful things happening in the paint, or there's a special feeling about the scene, or something about the composition that seems really special. And a lot of times that isn't really, you can't really tell in the process. You're just engaged in the process in the constructive sense, in constructing the painting. And it's not until you live with it that you get away from the process and you start appreciating it as a work of art. And that's often when you notice, like, wow, there's some magic in this, there's some cool stuff. That's often really difficult and impossible to reproduce, when you're doing another version of, like, say, like a study or something. If a study comes out and it's magical, to try to reproduce that and capture that magic again, it's not likely that it's going to happen. It could still be a good painting, but that's why I don't do it very often. I'd rather, like, just go out and plein air paint and get that magic right off the bat, and just, that's it. There it is. And that's kind of what I'm after, is having those magical moments in the paintings. So yeah, to answer your question, I find, what is more challenging? I find plein air is more challenging, but it's also more rewarding. Okay, so do you paint from photos? Yes. A lot of people have noticed that, a lot of my cityscapes are looking down the street. So you can tell, like, I would have had to set up my easel in the middle of the street. Also, this person was asking also about, like, special lighting effects. Like, there's a lot of sunsets or dusk paintings in this show. I like that time of day when you've got the mix of, like, incandescent or man-made light with the natural light of the sky. That's a beautiful time of day, and it's really fun as a painter to experiment with those lighting effects. But those effects move really quickly, so you can only work from photographs. And what I do with that is I go out with a DSLR camera, and what I've found that I have to do is I have to turn down the exposure, because otherwise the camera will compensate and make it look too bright, actually. So I'll turn down the exposure to the point where the paintings, where there's a nice balance between where the lights really pop out. So that's it. As far as, like I said, most of my city paintings are done from photographs for that reason, either because of the lighting effect or because of a compositional, like where I'm standing, like being in the middle of the street or whatever. Also, too, waves. I'll paint waves, both plein air, and I'll paint them from photographs. When I paint waves from photographs, what I'll do is I'll videotape, and then I'll scroll through, and when I see the wave at an interesting place, then I'll screenshot and work from that. So that's kind of how I work. And I will do, I guess, waves, sometimes landscapes where it's a distant view of a seascape, and I'll do the same thing. So whether it's a close-up of waves or waves in the distance, within a seascape, I'll often do those from video and then screenshot. Okay, so let's see. How long did it take you to learn to paint the light and shadow relationship? I'm kind of paraphrasing because it was a long question. So I will talk about how I approach creating light in the paintings. There's several ways. You know, when I first started painting, I would just do, it was a value thing. So a value is, you know, light to dark. So originally I did some exercises where I broke everything down into light and dark. So it'd just be two colors. I think I was just using gray or black or whatever. And if you know, and I would reduce the subject matter into areas of light, areas that are in shadow, period. That's it. And I practiced that quite a bit. And I remember hearing Hopper talk about, he started etching, and that's basically what you're doing. It's just, you've got black and white. And he said that that's really what, you know, allowed him to understand how to create a light pattern or an interesting lighting pattern in a painting. And so I did exercises like that, and I found that was really helpful. As far as color goes, I just started reading about, you know, about the Impressionists and about the relationships between complements. So for example, if you don't want to have your shadows super dark, which I don't, I like to have color in the shadows. Oftentimes what I'm looking for is, I'm looking for what kind of color, what am I seeing? Like, is the shadow, oftentimes you're doing plein air painting, it's predominantly blue because you're getting color from the sky. And then the surrounding lit up area will be warmer because it's getting the light from the sun. So it'd be like, you know, cool shadows with warm sunlight. And then if you have that, like say a blue orange or a yellow violet sort of relationship, it's like what the Impressionists found, that creates what they call the vibration or whatever, and it created a feeling of authentic light. So I keep those things in mind. There are other painters that will keep their shadows warm and their light cool. It doesn't matter, it's that play of complements. And here's another thing that I found is really good for to create illumination, is that within your blue shadow, say you have a shadow that's all blue, look for little bits of warm in there. So like, and also little value shifts. So if I've got, say, a blue shadow that's got some areas of, you know, tends to be a darker value, say it's a tree closer to the trunk, and then as it spreads out, the value will get lighter and lighter. And I will look for little shifts, like I said, in value and also in temperature within those shadows. And that's a really fun thing to do. It takes a while to see those things, but that's one of the benefits of plein air, because you can see those subtleties and they just don't show up on photographs. So once you've been plein air painting for a while, you'll know what to look for in a photograph, and you almost, even if you're not really seeing it, you're like, okay, I know that up under the eaves of this house there should be reflected light from the grass or whatever. So another reason to get out there and do some plein air painting. So how long did it take me to do that? I mean, it's just never ending. Like, I think I was getting a convincing feeling of light fairly early because it was so important to me. But I feel like it's continuing to get more, my ability is getting better at it, and so it's a never-ending process. So I hope that answers that question. Moving on, do you find it emotionally difficult to sell a painting you really like, or do you get emotionally attached to any of the paintings? I do not, let's see, how should I say this? There are certain paintings that I will hang on to. And here's the ones that I'll hang on to. If I make some kind of breakthrough in a painting and I feel like there's something going on that I haven't seen before in my own work, maybe I've experimented with a, you know, like a different type of brush or a different process or something, you know, I'm experimenting and it's like, wow, what happened in that painting? There's something magical going on in there that I don't fully understand. Those paintings I'll keep, and I'll live with those because I want to be able to, you know, if you were to sell something like that, you wouldn't have a chance to study your own accomplishment there or your own discovery. So those are paintings that I'll hang on to. That doesn't mean I won't sell them later, but that's one time that I'll hang on to stuff, is when I make a discovery and I want to study what's going on. Number two, I will, what else? If I hang on to a painting for a long period of time and I grow attached to it. That doesn't happen with all work. but I find that if I hang a painting on my wall and I live with it, if it's a good painting, I'm gonna have a lot of trouble selling with it because it's become a part of my day-to-day living. And I have a lot of paintings like that that are just, you know, going to be a part of my permanent collection just because I've lived with them for so long and I don't want to sell them. I would keep them in the family, but I wouldn't want to, yeah, I wouldn't sell them. Other paintings, you know, I lived with for a while and I think, okay, I could part with that. But it's strange, even some paintings that, I have paintings that I think, you know, I hung up just because they didn't sell and I didn't think they were great. And then as I've lived with them, I just think, wow, there's some really great stuff going on in these paintings. So that's another type of painting that I get emotionally attached to is if I live with it for a while. Let's see if there's any others. As far as, you know, new work, most of the time with me, I create new work and it's usually sold pretty quickly. So I don't have that opportunity to connect with it as much, which is probably a better thing because I have to sell work to make a living. So there's another part of this too that people don't realize, or maybe I feel like I make so much work and I wouldn't be the best person to care for the work because I'm so into the process that oftentimes I'm stacking paintings up. And it feels good to me if I have a piece of work that I'm really proud of, that it's, you know, and I frame it up, I sign it, it's all nice and ready to go, like, you know, and then it's going to be out in the world where it can be enjoyed instead of in a box somewhere. And then there's also, you know, it's a very satisfying thing when somebody buys a painting. I mean, it's a compliment when somebody says, oh, I like your work, or that's a beautiful painting. But there's nothing, you know, it's a bigger compliment when somebody gets out their, you know, their cash and wants to buy something. So there's something really nice about that. And I feel like I said, I want my work out in the world where it can be enjoyed as opposed to at home where it's in a box or worse, like leaned up against something and could potentially get messed up. So yeah, so that's it for that question. Let's see, have you thought of painting portraits? No, I don't think I'd ever do I've done like a couple, did not enjoy that process, and I'll tell you why. When you're doing a portrait commission, there's this expectation that the painting is going to look like the person, and that's the main mission. I'm not as interested in doing that. I do like to capture a likeness if I'm painting people, but I like to do it in a more impressionistic way. And so I do paint people, and I enjoy painting people. I don't think there are many. I don't know if there are any. I think there was. Yeah, like some shows I'll have, like last year I had a painting of a crosswalk and a bunch of people walking across that, people on sailboats. I had quite a few people in last year's show, sometimes surfers, not surfing, but usually like walking on the beach, holding their boards, reflection in the wet sand. I'm gonna do some more of those next year. So yeah, I do people, but not portraits. Not really interested in portrait painting. Any places you'd like to paint inside or outside of California? I do like painting in Maine, around the Port Clyde area. I enjoy that a lot, although I haven't gone in a couple years. I do feel like I want to focus mostly on California. There's a lot here. There's a lot of variety. I feel a connection. I've been here, moved here when I was a kid in 1979. I was 13, maybe 12 or 13. 14? Anyway, I was young. It was like right before starting high school. So I've been out here a long time, grew up on the East Coast in New Jersey. So I do still feel a connection with the East Coast. It'd be nice to paint in, paint Cape Cod, the area, South Wellfleet, Truro, which incidentally is where Hopper used to paint. And that's just the area that I've been going to since I was a baby. So I feel like it'd be nice to return now that I've been painting for, you know, almost 18 years, is it? 17 years? And go paint in that area, because I've only painted there like a couple days on a trip to Maine. Emma and my daughter went down there and hung out. I wanted to show her where I used to go and when I was a kid. And so I did a few plein air paintings, but we were only there for a couple days. I didn't really get to fully explore it. So I would like to paint Cape Cod again, South Wellfleet, Truro, Provincetown, that area. Definitely like to do that someday, preferably in the fall, like September. That'd be perfect. Maine, I'd like to paint more of Maine, and then I'd like to explore a lot more of California, for sure. There's just so much here, and I've just kind of touched on a bit of it. You know, painted a Joshua tree. I've not painted in the Sierra, up in the mountains here. I'd like to do that. So, California. Let's see. Do you find there's a difference between your favorite paintings and the public's favorite paintings? Yeah, I do. As far as there's a lot of mystery as far as that goes. You know, the paintings I like, you know, I do feel like they often sell. Like if there's something I really like and I'm really excited about, they do tend to sell. So there's a similarity there. But you know, there's always occasionally paintings that I'm not as crazy about that sell. Those are not in my shows though. Those would be more when somebody comes over to the studio and picks through boxes. That's when I'm always surprised, because I let them pick through paintings that, you know, maybe, you know, I didn't feel like I wanted to put in a show. It doesn't mean they're not good paintings. It's just that for whatever reason they didn't appeal to me as much. So, you know, and every year when I have a show, I'd say this year, I'm not quite sure how many paintings out of the show have sold. I know we've sold like 26 paintings so far. But some of those were from inventory as well. And there were 40 paintings in the show originally. So I don't know the exact number, but, you know, so not all, and all the paintings that I put in a show are ones that I really like. I mean, those are my favorites from the year. And, you know, every year you make, you know, if we sell half, that's great, you know. So, as far as like, yeah, as far as it is interesting to see people's taste, and there will be certain paintings in a show, not this year so much though, where people will, like Jen will say, I could have sold that painting 3 times, because there's like a lot of inquiry about it, a lot of interest. I don't think this year, I don't know, I'd have to check in with Jen about that, and see if there's, you know, if there were any that were super popular or got inquired about a lot. So yeah, so as far as that goes, there is one thing I will talk about as far as, you know, paintings people like and what actually sells. I have posted I did a wave video where I showed, you know, like kind of critiquing my wave videos, or not my wave videos, but my wave paintings. And 3 of the paintings that I critiqued in that video, I put into this show. And the strange thing is, the one that was the favorite, hands down, in the comment section on the video, everyone's like, you know, wave number 2 or whatever. It just was hands down the favorite. People loved it. That painting is still available. And the other 2 that were less appreciated in the video, those sold almost immediately. So that's weird. I would have thought it would have been the other way around. So you just never can tell. Never can tell. So, all right, let's see here. This one is, do you have a favorite painting in the show? No, I don't really. To be totally honest, I don't. I don't have a favorite. I like all of these for specific reasons. And I kind of talk about that in my the other video, which I think I linked above already. This is a long artist talk. I'll link that video down below. It's my gallery tour where I talk about the paintings in the show. I'll link that down below as well in the description. But, you know, in that I talk about the things that I maybe like or appeal to me about specific paintings. So yeah, I don't really have a favorite. Let's see here. Do you build your own frames? Yes, I do build my own frames. And there's a video about that as well. And I'll also put that in the description. I'm really making a lot of work for myself here. But I'll put that down below if you want to check out how I build my frames. And then let's see, how did your relationship with studio start? I talked about that. Oh, what is the difference between saturation and dark? Okay, so dark would be value. You know, like, so if you had, let's talk about dark. If you had a blue, but it was a very grayed down blue, you know, so in other words, you mix a little bit of orange to complement and kind of gray it down a bit, that would be desaturating. Now, if you darkened it, you'd be darkening it and you know, darkening the value. So the difference between saturation and dark is just how close to black it is. Like, it's, you know, it's dark. And then saturation just means how present is the color, or how pure is the color. So like, yeah, I think that's a good, you know, like say yellow, cadmium yellow medium straight out of the tube is as saturated as the yellow is going to get. And then you could dilute that or gray down the saturation. In the case of yellow, you'd put like some dioxazine purple, which is a complement, and now you're starting to desaturate that yellow. You're graying it down. I hope that explains that. Okay, let's see here. I think I went through those questions, and maybe I've gone through all of them. I think I have. So that is it. I hope I didn't miss anybody's questions. Again, I was really excited about the work this year. I do feel like all the plein air painting I've done and all the videos I've made this year have really contributed to making this maybe, the strongest work I've done. I feel like it is. And so I'm really happy with it. Like I said, down below you can see there's a link to images and purchase info. And Jen and Rab at Studio Gallery are wonderful to work with, and they ship paintings. And yeah, they're just a joy to work with. So anyway, I hope I answered your questions, and get out and see the show if you can. 1641 Pacific Avenue, San Francisco at Studio Gallery. And thanks so much, guys. I will see you in the next video.